Your Royal Highness, Queen Elizabeth, Ma'am. As a member of a lawfully recognised competent authority representing the children of Britain and abroad, it is my duty to request that your Prime Minister, Mr David Cameron, be arrested by police in light of evidence and the resulting very serious allegations against him. For further information in support of the above request, please view the link shown below this video. In summary, allegations include facts and evidence implicating David Cameron in serious fraud, theft and money laundering, as well as covering up paedophile crimes and thereby leaving multiple British and foreign children at risk, and most especially considering the power high-profile criminals hold over the general public, both in Britain and abroad. In light of the aforementioned allegations, as a concerned citizen, I feel it is necessary to alert Your Majesty to the inherent threat Cameron's government poses, not only to the people of Britain, but for people and children abroad and including the throne of England itself. Any threat to the sovereign crown is high treason. The nature of the threat is not a bomb or an armed coup. In the sophisticated world of today, treasonists deploy their insidious influences covertly, and yet, nonetheless, their criminal intents are evident in terms of an intellectually recognised and professionally acknowledged threat. I draw your Majesty's attention to the EU study on youth radicalisation. It is an in-depth report based on an extensive study on the issue of youth radicalisation and resulting extremism. Unless Your Majesty's government can produce an equally comprehensive study to refute the conclusions of the EU report, they have no solid grounds by which they might defend themselves from the inevitable conclusions that in light of that EU study, this government's intention to scrap human rights is in reality a threat to stir up public discontent via the resulting radicalisation of British youth, i.e. insurrection and civil war in Britain, and with a far-reaching impact threatening the stability of other nations as an added and very real and serious concern. We, the people and the public of Britain and Europe, can never forget the price of 2 world wars that led to the establishing of our human rights, and it is because of the immense sacrifice our ancestors made that those rights cannot be removed without mass public protest, which, according to the EU study, radicalisation and extremism fostered by scrapping of human rights are guaranteed to occur. What can Mr Cameron provide by way of reasoned and professional analysis that scrapping human rights will not cause mass social unrest in Britain and abroad? Indeed, according to the aforementioned study, people protesting against scrapping of their human rights are considered neither radical nor extreme. In such circumstances, it is the powers engaged in denying or demolishing those rights which are lawfully judged radical and extreme. I am aware that as Queen and in authority controlled from childhood, Your Majesty is perhaps somewhat blinded by powers who seek to deceive and subvert and utilise your authority towards satisfying their own ambitions, and certainly it is likely, possible, Your Majesty is compromised and essentially gagged. It is for this reason an amnesty is offered to all people in positions of authority who have been made complicit against their will, and any crimes committed under such oppression are forgiven as soon as the compromised find courage and strength to stand up for the law and thereby denounce their oppressors. The throne of England serves a force of spirit. We, the people of Britain, are informed is a Holy Spirit, and that throne is blessed and sanctioned by authority of God and Jesus. It is therefore a blasphemy against God and Jesus for a Queen of England to support a government who intends to deny human rights, being as by today those rights are an integral feature of God's law and EU law, and most certainly none could reasonably suggest that Jesus himself is not fully in support of those rights. As Queen, Your Majesty agreed by oath and by signed written contract to uphold the laws of God above the laws of men. While men may take your personal relationship with God as of little significance, surely this cannot be true for Your own Majesty's self in terms of soul and conscience. Certainly, in agreeing to support Cameron's government and acting as their Speaker in opening of Parliament, you are, according to the evidence and legal facts, knowingly and blatantly, publicly condoning denial of God's law in favour of upholding the laws of men. Men who are themselves suspects in every type of crime against people, our planet, and our children. To suggest such individuals are above the law is also a blasphemy, not just against God's law, but even against the very concept of God. That concept of God is the foundation of every generation. It is the cornerstone of our nation, and that concept cannot be sullied without inevitably invoking the most dire consequences. If the power seated on the throne of England are not serving God and God's law, then that power is not serving benevolence, but instead malice and crime. According to our historical and regularly updated concept of God, any power that denies benevolent protective law which represents our human rights is an evil maligned consciousness, and every responsible and lawful adult is duty-bound to defend our future generations from that negative and corruptive influence. Even God as a concept is not above God's law. For too long, we the public have been passively tolerant of the gradual erosion and ignorance of our rights and laws by successive governments and authorities serving throughout Your Majesty's reign, which today amount to a corporate theft of our NHS and public social security. This final act of scrapping our human rights is but a formality, considering those rights are barely upheld or honoured anyway. Why should the people of Britain be denied our rightful, spiritual and lawful heritage when we have never had a chance to fully appreciate or even know the full and true benefits of it? Concerning the issue of scrapping our human rights, in light of the above, it is no different to giving a child a gift, but then refusing to permit that child any chance to actually own or benefit from that gift, except in some vague promise that the gift will be theirs one day in the future and it is being protected from thieves by a higher power. If any such higher power is not serving God's law, then in truth the gift is stolen, and it is not a higher power recognised by God. It is in fact a lower power, because all powers who seek to deny our universal human rights are acting against God and in defiance of God's law, which is the highest authority, and without blessing of that authority, Your Majesty could not have been crowned Queen. All such powers are judged corrupted because they serve a base intelligence, and because humanity is valued and defined according to our gift of intelligence, any choices our governments make which are not rooted in lawful intelligence represent a threat to humanity and the foundation of our nation. For so long has the lawlessness reigned roughshod over God's law and human rights, animal rights and earth rights, and only because the people are born into a psychological jail, imprisoned in mystery and denied access or credibility to the law and their rights, and that includes Your Majesty. By now, the resulting culture of greed and depravity among our self-appointed social elites has become a socially accepted norm. This lawlessness of power now threatens to completely own and control our nation and enslave the people to serving needs, ambitions and interests of largely foreign powers who are alien to humanitarian values, intelligence, culture and needs. Either way, by insurrection or corporate takeover, Britain faces the reality of high treason and all the misery and confusion it inflicts. The allegations against David Cameron and his government are far too serious to ignore, and most especially when those suspects are threatening to remove every British citizen's human rights. We cannot fail to take into account either their collective complicity in supporting those who commit crimes against children. The removal of human rights is equally a denial of children's rights, and in light of UN and EU child protection laws, the resulting level of risk against children via evidently corrupted authorities is lawfully unacceptable. I therefore humbly appeal to Your Majesty to think very carefully and to be at peace in your soul, if only now finally you recognise the manner by which the powers of Your Majesty's reign have been led astray, that Your Majesty may yet hold back the flames of corruption and support the throne of England as sovereign, as keeper of God's Christian, humane law. Please uphold the law. Please suspend the opening of Parliament and appoint a democratically elected interim government while police investigations ensue. Please do not incriminate yourself by willingly giving your support to those who are lawfully suspected of conspiring to commit high treason and of participating in multiple and serious crimes. Finally, it is of utmost importance that Your Majesty addresses the issues arising from very serious crimes committed by British authorities and the Church of England against people and children abroad, most specifically those of your colonies, e.g. Chagos Islanders, Native American children and people and children of Iraq. Allegations which are again supported by irrefutable and conclusive evidence. As a result of crimes against Native American children in particular, Your Majesty has been found guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced by the International Common Law Court to 25 years imprisonment. I referred earlier to an amnesty for those forced to comply with corruption, and Your Majesty has been a psychological slave to a lawless consciousness since childhood, one which has persuaded you to believe yourself superior to others, and that cruelty to animals is a sport. Considering the immense powers and influence of those interested parties who surrounded your cradle from birth, I strongly feel Your Majesty is herself an abused child and essentially is held prisoner and prevented from connecting with her true humanity of compassionate intelligence. No one can bring back the dead. The many who lost their lives to tyranny committed in Your Majesty's name can never be compensated. Unless Your Majesty herself is prepared to acknowledge those crimes and endeavour to make reparations and address and compensate in any way possible, to alleviate the continued suffering of those who yet survive. Your government's Ministry of Defence lied to Parliament, who as a result broke the Geneva Convention and sanctioned the use of WMDs, depleted uranium weapons in Iraq. Parliament is now guilty of war crimes against innocent and defenceless people and children. We the British public cannot ignore such crimes, as they are committed in our collective name, and our taxes contribute toward the upkeep of all the corrupted powers who conspire to commit such vile acts against humanity. I am aware of the elitist rhetoric about too many people, and elitist ambitions for a cull are commonly known. Please be aware that God said to humanity, "Go forth and multiply," and certainly this was not so billions could be culled in a mass sacrifice for sake of a better future. In reality, any consciousness that could consent to and support such a terrible ambition is actually incapable of providing a better future for anyone, and not even itself, certainly not for any royal family. Time has told us the truth. Human rights and equality, especially for women, bring rapid drops in birth rates, and present overpopulation problems are largely and mostly due to mass poverty and deprivation of women and children's rights in particular. With a stronger allegiance to our human rights, the human population will stabilise and never reach any level of overpopulation. Therefore, by establishing and upholding our human rights globally, those genuinely concerned among the elite can be assured that they are most successfully addressing the issue of overpopulation. The people need employment, and our planet needs help. Employ people to help build a better future and a better world, a better life on the strength of our human rights. In that world, killing animals for sport would not be tolerated, and though all such ill-conditioned pleasures are considered by those who enjoy them as a loss of rights and freedom, the truth is any and all such perceived losses are doubly compensated for by the genuine and honest pleasures of life that are so commonly denied even to the very richest, when we live outside the beneficence of God, universal law, of human, animal and earth rights to a life of abundance in compassion. Freedom comes when we live with respect for the rights of others. Freedom without respect for a fair law or rights is the true definition of anarchy. I speak to Your Majesty as one who has been chosen to bear witness to and testimony of the higher consciousness which appeared to myself in the shape and form and human form of a light being on April 26, 1992. I have spent the last 23 years of my life in research, study and meditation, as well as helping others along my way, only to be sure of both the message and the intellectual and emotional validity of that message as being genuinely for the good of all life on earth. Forgiveness is central to that message, and we are all forgiven who stand up in support of universal law and all the rights granted therein. Jesus asked me to love my enemy and to show understanding and to take everything into account, and therefore it is my lawful right and duty and compassion to warn your Majesty regarding the errors of the powers who claim to be serving under your rule. Those powers in truth are undermining and corrupting your powers as Queen. According to universal law, your Majesty and government are presently ruling through anarchy, and it is today an open and conspicuous anarchy that strains at a gnat while swallowing a camel. Mr. Cameron is a camel, and the law-abiding citizens of Britain are a gnat when we weigh up the risk of his radical extremism and all its subversive powers as a real and deadly threat to Britain as a nation. Dark days are upon us. The light shines on. Who can fail to notice the sun and the moon and the stars in this dark sky? They are the true power behind the throne of England, and without the support of universal law, the throne of England shall fall to ruin along with its people. To deny this fact is an act of ignorance, and ignorance is a crime against God and our natural intelligence. Your Majesty has a choice, and you face the front lines of discontent against any favour you show to my request and advice. Be assured that universal love will hold your hand, and the many crimes committed in your enforced mystification will be forgiven. They say a leopard cannot change its spots. Humanity is not a leopard. We can change our spots. You can change too, your Majesty, just as Saul became Paul. You can stand for the good and the right way, and wipe away the tears from the children's eyes. Be no longer a queen for the corporation that has devoured your crown, courts and church. Be a human being and stand up for your lawful right that has been denied to yourself and family for centuries, the legal right to live and thrive in equality with the people of your nation, a people whom you trust implicitly and only because we are each protected by universal law, which has promised to deliver all our future generations into true and unconditional love. Please stand up for our human rights.